taking care of your lives in this way of practicing meditation and Dharma. So this is the Tuesday tune-in, and that means that it's a program of, roughly speaking, half an hour of meditation, half an hour of Dharma talk, and half an hour of questions, reflections, comments at the end. And before I jump into the meditation, I just want to again announce that I will be away for this retreat that's happening this weekend. So the Thursday morning virtual program is still happening. That's Rocky out of California. So she keeps chugging along over there. And but Friday night Sutta contemplation and Sunday morning Sunday Sounds program will be paused. Everyone is welcome, and I believe you can actually get on there for free to listen to the talk that I'm doing in Atlanta on Sunday, which is roughly about 10:30 in the morning, a little bit later than our usual time of 9:30. And yeah, other things happening next month. But it's good to keep an eye on the website because we do make changes pretty frequently, and where I'm going to be announcing the summer schedule in about a week from now. So we'll have a few adjustments, a couple of new actual public programs. All right. So for tonight's meditation, I thought we would do a really easy mindfulness of breathing. And I'll offer some gentle guidance as we go along. Mindful, there are many different ways actually to practice mindfulness and breathing. But the one that I'm going to offer is something about being able to rest your attention on the phenomena of breathing, on the sensations of breathing, and really see if you can allow the attention to kind of stay with it. And then, of course, the mind moves along, we get distracted, and just coming back without any judgment or hassle about it, actually. Once you realize that you've been distracted, then you're back because you've realized. So there's no point in doing anything but just going back to the thing, the sensations that you're trying to really pay attention to. All right, so with that, we can go ahead and settle into a meditation posture. I like to begin with a little bit of movement in the body. Loosening up any tendency to lean toward one side or the other. And releasing any tension that you're willing to let go of right now. And allowing the body to find an upright posture. Sensing the weight of the body on your seat. and relaxing the belly. If you want to lower the energy of the body, you can place your hands on your thighs. Or if you're feeling a little tired or a little sleepy, you can gather the hands together in your lap. Right hand over left hand, and the thumb tips gently touching. Allowing the bones of the spine to come into alignment. So that perhaps the muscles of the chest and the back can relax and become a little wider. And feeling that alignment all the way up through the neck and the head. And softening the eyes. And softening the mouth. And perhaps by now, the sensations of the breath, breathing the body, have started to become apparent. Then you can just rest your attention there. wherever you feel those sensations. In the nose or in the throat, or the chest or the belly. Any place is fine. Just staying curious about the sensations of the breath. Aware of the in-breath and aware of the out-breath. Ah, so nice that we get to sit and observe the breath, receiving the sensations moment by moment. And perhaps after some time of observing the breath, you might check in for any pauses between the breaths. No need to do anything at all. The breath keeps breathing the body as it's been doing all day. We're just noticing those natural moments of stillness between the movements of the breath. Returning again and again to the sensations of the breath with curiosity. How is it now? And in these last few minutes of the meditation, opening the attention to the whole body from head to toe, still aware of the breath, breathing the body in and out. That brings us to the end of the meditation. Welcome, John. Okay. So now it's time for the Dhamma talk, and as usual, I'm going to begin with the homage to the Buddha and what we call the triple gem. And folks are welcome to chant along. Folks online, please keep your mics muted. And this is in the ancient language of Pali, related to Sanskrit. And it is saying, honor to the Blessed One, the fully awakened one, the perfectly enlightened one, meaning the Buddha. And then at the end there, it says Buddha, Dhamma. So Buddha means the historical person in India who discovered this path of awakening, as well as him as a representative, if you will, of the quality of awakening that we all have the capacity to realize. And Dhamma as the teachings or the truths to which those teachings point, and Sangha as the multifold community of folks who are doing all sorts of practice on the path. So again, you're welcome to chant along if you like, or just let it wash over you. Namo tassa bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Bhutang dhammang sanghang namasami. Mm. So I had about 3 different talks in mind for today. And now we decided on one just now. I decided. So what I would like to talk about tonight is a little bit about mindfulness. Uh, Mindfulness is a quality that we hear a lot about in the world these days. I went down to South America to teach some retreats down there, and even in Spanish, they use the word mindfulness and not some other translation. It was quite interesting. Or like you can go to the grocery store now and there's Time magazine on mindfulness, right? And I don't vouch for the quality of those teachings of Time magazine on mindfulness. Who knows really who's writing that stuff? But what I will say is that it's kind of interesting that we could say Western styles of meditation or of thinking about practice have really honed in on that particular quality. So there's some good reasons for that. Uh, but I would say that's probably a bit different than a more traditional approach. That would be uh, a little more balanced with things like ethics or things like concentration or practices, other kinds of practices like um, generosity or pilgrimage or any number of different other types of practice. But to talk about mindfulness is definitely important. And what is it, right? So you could say a very straightforward definition of mindfulness is a receptive form of attention to phenomena in the present moment. So there are various components to that, right? So the receptivity of mindfulness. Mindfulness is not a kind of attention that necessarily goes out to grab at an object. So oftentimes we refer to an object as the thing to which you're paying attention. It would be called an object in sort of meditation frameworks. So there's this receptive quality. It's typically understood as kind of a soft, gentle form of attention for that reason, because of the receptivity that's there. But it's also receptive in the sense of a kind of absence of judgment or an absence of comparison, absence of discerning, um, absence of, you could say, investigating what the thing is. It's just that initial receiving it, and receiving it again with as little judgment and as little comparison as possible, and receiving specifically this what's here in the present moment. And the funny thing about that is that when we talk about it that way, then sometimes people think, oh, well, then you can't think about the past, or you're not supposed to think about the future if you're being mindful. But the fact is, if you're thinking about the past, you can be mindful that, oh, look, right now I'm thinking about the past, right? That too is mindfulness. Or you can sit down and plan something for the future. You know, you want to get a degree, or you want to go on vacation, or you want to meet up with your friend, or whatever it is. You can make a plan, of course, and be mindful that that's happening, as contrasted perhaps with that kind of thing happening, and you're so in your daydream that you're out of touch with the present moment, right? And that's why we say, when you come back, right? So I gave that instruction. Oh, when you notice, you're already back. Well, there's no back and forth really, but it's that feeling, right? Of suddenly you're like, oh, wait a minute, I was daydreaming, or I was off, you know, in my favorite vacation place somewhere, and now I'm back here, aware of what's happening in this moment. So mindfulness has this quality of presence, of receptivity, of non-judgmental awareness and attention, of uh, presence with what's here right now. And there's a very famous sutta, and perhaps this is one of the reasons why we see so much emphasis on this here and in contemporary times. There's a very well-known sutta. So the suttas are the discourses. They're written in this ancient Indic language of Pali, written down many hundreds of years after the Buddha's life, but they purport to be they're the record that we have of the historical Buddha, the awakened one, who lived in northern India around 500 years or so before the start of the Common Era. And there's a very well-known sutta. So sutta means a discourse in which he says that he's talking about the 7 factors of awakening. So mind you that right off the bat, that might ring a bell. Oh, hello. There's not one factor of awakening. Mindfulness is not the one factor of awakening. There are 7 of them, at a minimum, 7 conditions that are required for enlightenment. And mindfulness is usually listed as the first one. It's just the first one that he would name when he would rattle off the list of 7. And then there are 6 more, and I will rattle them off for you. You don't need to, there's no pop quiz at the end, I promise. But investigation is the next one. Again, as contrasted with mindfulness, investigation, effort, joy. Joy is a necessary ingredient for waking up. Then you have tranquility, calming of the body and calming of the mind. And then you have concentration, and no, wait, did I miss one in there? Mindfulness, investigation of dhammas, energy, joy. No, I got it right. And then, and then tranquility, and then you have concentration and equanimity at the end. So those are the 7. But in this sutta, the Buddha divides them up into 2 categories, into the ones that are stimulating and the ones that are calming. So that's also kind of interesting. It speaks to this particular sutta is very straightforward about speaking to a need for balance. That part of what we're actually trying to cultivate in our practice is a sense of balance. So you have the stimulating factors and you have the calming factors. And he says you balance those based on where you are when you sit down. If you're stimulated, then you don't work on joy, for example, because joy is a stimulating factor. And people sometimes get very frustrated about that because joy will naturally come up in the meditation, but then they'll start thinking a lot and they'll think something's wrong. But that nothing's wrong. It's just that joy is a stimulating factor and it tends to require some other balancing with the tranquilizing, the calming factors. Or vice versa. If you sit down, you're feeling very still, you're feeling very relaxed, right? Then you don't go with the tranquilizing factors because that puts you to sleep. That means there's no meditation. Then the mind goes off on the vacation, right? You want to work on the stimulating factors. But mindfulness, he said in this sutta, very interestingly, at the very end of the sutta, he says, mindfulness is always useful. It is neither a stimulating factor nor a calming factor. It is always useful. So that's a pretty emphatic statement right there, to say that the practice of mindfulness is always useful. And why might that be? Well, in part because, and I'm going to also make an emphatic statement, without mindfulness, you actually are not able to be fully aware of the presence of a thing. Anything, any phenomena that's happening in your life. And I'll give you an example of this. So apologies to folks who have heard this story before. I like to repeat. I have many, many stories, but I also like to repeat a certain group of them. And this is a story about when I was teaching at San Francisco Zen Center many, many years ago. And we had a big cohort of about 60 people who were doing a year-long course. So we had 5 co-leaders, and each of the 5 co-leaders had 12 people in their group, in their kind of subgroup of the larger group. And those were based on where we were. So I was living across the bay from San Francisco at that time in Berkeley. And so we had a group of people who were in what we call the East Bay, 12 people who would meet with me over there in Berkeley. Okay, great. So the course is getting started. And the first month, we give everybody their homework. So what's their homework? So the homework for the first month is, in the morning, when you get dressed, you should pay attention to which foot you put in your kilt or your shorts or your dress or your skirt or your pants first. Which foot goes first? Every morning, you check it out. And you see whether there's a pattern there. Which foot do you tend to go first? Right? That's your homework for the first month. So what is that? That is a basic mindfulness of body practice. Basic mindfulness of body, just getting people started. Okay, try to pay attention to this one point in the day. Not the whole day. We're not asking you to pay attention the whole day, just this one point in the day. So second month comes along, and I can tell you this because this person who shared some things in private with me then later told the whole group. So I can tell you this story that she shared with everybody. So one of the women that was in this group comes to me the second month, and she takes me aside, and she's like, I still haven't seen which foot I put in my skirt in the morning. And she's kind of frustrated about this, right? This is a young woman. She considers herself very confident. She has a responsible job. She has a family. You know, she's been practicing meditation for numerous years. And 4 or 5 weeks have gone by. She still hasn't seen her foot go in her skirt in the morning. So we talked a little bit about that. Okay, then what to do, right? So what to do? Some things to do would be, first of all, if you're doing things in a habitual way, then you might be a little more checked out. So you might want to just change up whatever your regular routine is in the morning and see if that helps. Yeah. Also, it's helpful to be present for the moment before the moment that you're trying to see, right? This is very important, that you're seeing the moment before the actual moment you're trying to observe, so that you catch it, right? Kind of catch it in the stream, so to speak. So the idea would be, maybe when she gets her clothes out of the dresser, she starts to try to become more mindful. That's it, before she puts them on, okay? Something like that. The other thing was about rushing, maybe slow down a little bit. So in the mornings, it's busy time for her. She's trying to get her daughter dressed. She's trying to get ready for work. She says, I would get to the car and then I would be like, oh, I didn't see the foot again. So it's a busy time in the morning. So I said, okay, just maybe try to slow down. Just try to slow down. So give her some ideas about what to do. All right. So she comes back a couple weeks later and she says, guess what? I said, what? She said, I saw which foot I put in my skirt in the mornings. Usually I put in, and I'm saying arbitrarily because I don't remember which foot she said, left foot, when I put when I get dressed in the morning. Usually I put my left foot in first. Great, wonderful, ta-da, you saw it. Little mindfulness of body. She says, but that's not the coolest part. Ah, so now what is the coolest part? She said, well, the coolest part is that I learned that my daughter also puts her left foot in first. Oh, wow. That is the coolest part, right? So not only did this young woman change her relationship to her own body, her own morning routine, her ability to observe what she wants to observe in her life, but she also slightly, for the better, changed her relationship with her little 3-year-old daughter, right? Because now she's more aware of the daughter, and she's actually, maybe there's a tiny bit less friction every morning because you hand the child the left side first, right? And if she changes, that's okay, because you're mindful, you're paying attention, then you change to the other side. No big deal, right? So when we are mindful, what's happening? What's happening is that there's a shift in our inner world experience of what's happening in our own bodies and minds, in our own lives. And there's a shift in how we are relating to the rest of the world, just by being more present for it. It's beautiful. It's I would say it's magical, but it's not magical actually, right? It's just how we're built. It's just how we're built. And this is the important part. That mindfulness is always useful because it enables us to start to observe the lived experience and know the truths that our lived experience is teaching us. Because these bodies and minds are showing us something. Huh? They are showing us something all the time. Many things, in fact. But until we're able to be with that, then it's just going by, right? It's like, as my brother used to say, overhead transmission. It doesn't really land. It doesn't really land. And sometimes that's intentional, right? Sometimes we are tuned out on purpose. Sometimes we are tuned out because we find that it's difficult to be here, that it's difficult to see what's actually going on. It's painful, whether emotionally painful or physically painful, or it's caught up in a story that's difficult, something that we don't want to tell another story again and again, but we do, right? So sometimes we're doing that as a sort of protection. But I would suggest that In that case, then, the point is to be mindful of that. It's important to also be mindful of that. Oh, look, I'm not willing to experience this part of my body. Okay, that's also information. That's also information. That's also a place of some lived curiosity. Okay, so what's happening there? I don't know. Maybe I don't know, and maybe I don't want to know. But I can attend to that with care also once I can observe it. Oh, I see that this is something that's difficult. This is something that I'm not willing or able to connect with right now. And why? Because those things also change. With that gentle, receptive kind of attention, right? Not this kind of driving investigation. I have to break it apart, you know? No, with this gentle, receptive, timely attention that is mindfulness, right? Eventually, there is a sense of care and a sense of safety that can open up there. And then looking further down the path, the reason why mindfulness is usually listed as first is also because it becomes the basis for meditation. All meditation is based in mindfulness. So now there are, different types of meditation. There are the states of concentration, and there are states of what we would call insight, or sort of attending to changing phenomena. But all of them require mindfulness as a basis, as a starting point. And that can develop over time. The interesting thing about it is that what we also find is that both the breadth and the depth of mindfulness can improve. It can shift over time. And by breadth, I mean one's ability to maintain a sense of mindfulness throughout the day. So the typical tendencies that are described, and it's not always like this, but the kind of to generalize a little bit, it's usually when something pleasant happens, we want more and more and more of that. And when something unpleasant happens, we want to push that stuff away and get rid of it, rejection. And when something neutral happens, something that's not on that spectrum, on either end of that spectrum, kind of in the middle there, we tend to ignore that. That's a very interesting point. I think that you notice when you start to become mindful that the mind will kind of naturally slide away from certain kinds of very neutral, very plain phenomena, right? And in fact, boredom is an example of this, right? To say that one is bored is to move from a neutral phenomena toward an aversion against that neutral phenomena, if you know what I'm saying. Okay? So, but the tendency with neutral phenomena is to ignore it, to slide away from it, to not even pay attention to it. Because why? Because it's not reinforcing our sense of who we are. You can't, based on neutral phenomena, you can't really put a stake in the ground and say, I hate this or I love this, right? Generally, we wouldn't do that. So, because it's not reinforcing our sense of self and our sense of determination, if you will, then the mental tendency is to slide off of that. But as you become more and more willing to practice and to meditate, the capacity to be with neutral phenomena grows and grows. The capacity to not slide off, not ignore that, grows and grows. And that's huge because neutral phenomena can be very peaceful. 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 That is critical. That is critical. In fact, I would go so far as to say that it is impossible to develop any sort of concentration until you have at least some capacity to stay with and pay attention to neutral phenomena. And so that little bit in the meditation where I say, oh, and observe the pause, right? What is the pause? The pause is when the breath stops moving, the body stops moving, and there's a moment, and there's some stillness, and something might happen. You might feel pain in your body, or you might have a spark of an idea. Other things start to happen, right? If you're moving away from it. But if you're staying with a pause, then what is it? It's a pause, right? It's a moment of stillness and more or less neutrality. And so that's a way to start to train the mind. Oh, yeah, it's okay. It's okay to just hang out. It's okay to just hang out here with the peaceful stuff, with the part that doesn't move, with the part that doesn't feel so punchy. Uh-huh. And that leads on, I would say, toward an incredible capacity that we have to develop our sense of perception. Just like my good friend who one day couldn't, even when she wanted to, couldn't see a particular phenomena. And then with some time and some effort and some practice was able to, right? So we're developing our capacity to perceive the truths of our lives, moment after moment with mindfulness, in very, very gross ways or sort of coarse ways, like where your foot is, and in more subtle ways, like the workings of the mind when the mind is very still. How does that happen? What's going on there? What's it teaching us? What's it showing us? So I suppose all of this is to say that I can't possibly agree with the Buddha more. And mindfulness is a practice, a quality that is useful all the time, all the time. All right, that's what I wanted to share for this evening. And that means that we have some time for comments or questions or reflections about the meditation, about the talk, about what's going on in your life with your clothing, whatever you want to talk about.
Dhammadīpā, do you want to, so if mindfulness is in the middle, if mindfulness is in the middle as a sort of neutral stance,
Yes,
joy is activating,
yes,
concentration is activating,
calming.
concentration is calming. So
Right.
can you just line those up for us?
Yep. So, yeah, thank you. Yes. So speaking of the 7 factors, so the first 3 factors are the stimulating factors. Investigation of, it's called investigation of dhammas, or that means investigation of phenomena. And why is that a stimulating factor? Because in order to investigate phenomena, you kind of have to activate the mind, right? You kind of have to go to the object and start to compare a little bit. Oh, this one is different from that one, or this is here now and it wasn't here before, right? So it takes a little bit more activity. So investigation, joy, and energy or effort, right?
Okay.
Right. So those first 3,
Okay.
those are the stimulating factors.
Okay.
And effort in this case, I should also say, is defined very differently actually than the way that we see effort defined in right effort when we talk about the Noble Eightfold Path. So here in the 7 factors, the Buddha says there are 3 kinds of effort rather than we hear about 4 when we're talking about the Noble Eightfold Path. Here he says there are 3 kinds of effort. There's an effort of getting started, this like launching yourself kind of effort. there is a persisting effort, and then there is the last effort, which is this kind of like getting over the last hump. So there's two kinds of like stronger ones, but then there's this also kind of balancing effort in the center, right? So he's also, again, talking about balance, even with that one factor. But effort is, so those are the three stimulating: investigation, effort, joy. And then you move to the three calming ones. So you have tranquilizing or calming, the passaddhi. And then you have the concentration, very, very, very calming. And then you have equanimity. And the difference, which I do want to say just a word about that. So the difference between tranquility and equanimity is very important. So tranquility is like stilling, is really stilling the mind, stilling the body, lessening, if you will, the intensity of the stimulation that's happening. Versus equanimity is what I usually call like your sea legs. Equanimity is being able to be with all sorts of different phenomena coming in all sorts of different ways without being set off balance. So equanimity is a sense of being able to, as I was saying before, like attend to all the different kinds of phenomena and receive them and work with them. So that's why it's considered a calming factor, right? Because if you're able to receive the phenomena with equanimity, then you don't go into anger, you don't go into despair, right? It's sort of leveling out, again, the intensity of this stimulation. Yep, you're welcome. It's a good way, it's a very good way to think about what's happening in meditation, particularly, but it's also useful off the cushion, I would say. Yeah.
So it seems as though there is a hierarchy there, with equanimity sort of at the top and mindfulness at the start. Is that how you see it? Or I'm sure things go back and forth all the time, but it's,
Nope.
so you can just go from mindfulness to equanimity, or is it just,
Right. It's sort of like, the way I think about it is like stew.
okay.
Like stew. Like it's just, you have all these different factors,
Mhm.
and you might sit down and have three of them present, or you might sit down and have none of them present. And you just sort of, it's sort of the art of kind of bringing them all together simultaneously. What we see, though, is that in like the mindfulness of breathing or the Satipatthana, the four foundations of mindfulness, what we see is that there is a clear stepping through different types of things that you're paying attention to, right? Like the body, the feeling tones, the mind, and then the phenomena, the content that's happening in the mind. But even so, those things are intended to bring the seven factors forth in various ways. Analia wrote a really good book about that, about how 16 Steps of Mindfulness of Breathing brings forth the seven factors of awakening. But yeah, it's more like stew. It's like we're just sort of putting in the ingredients as we see that, oh, it needs a little more carrot, or it needs a little more onion, or like that.
So is mindfulness the bowl or the pot?
Mindfulness, I would say, is like the water. You can't make soup without water, right? Something like that. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, Hamza.
Yes, could you just expound a little bit on investigation?
Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
this is a very good question also, because again, I think that the factor of investigation is often quite misunderstood. So it's called investigation of Dhammas, so we should know that specifically. And Dhammas used here, I usually translate it as phenomena. And it's Dhammas used in the very, very general sense with a lowercase d. So what investigation is doing is, once the phenomena has been received by mindfulness, whatever it is, then investigation is able to discern the qualities of the phenomena or make comparisons or see patterns. This is the kind of thing that's happening. So I'll give you an example, Hamza. You know, I was on retreat a while back. I'm sitting there on the deck of my little cabin in the woods there, and it's a cloudy, cloudy day. I'm looking out at the oak tree in front of me, and then the clouds part. And then it becomes a sunny day suddenly for a minute. And then I notice, oh, there's this big shadow of the oak that falls across the ferns there. And then the clouds come together again, and it's a cloudy day again, and the shadow of the oak goes away. So mindfulness receives that information, right? Just the visual information directly. Mindfulness says, okay, I see the tree, I see more sunshine, I see shadow, I see tree without shadow again. The shadow goes away. Okay, mindfulness receives that information. But investigation puts that together and says, oh, interesting. So the necessary condition for shadow wasn't there in the beginning. And I would not have noticed that until it was there. And then there was enough sunshine for the shadow to happen. And then again, I compare that state to the next state where the shadow goes away again. And I go, oh, right. And what's different? Well, the clouds have closed again and the sunshine is gone. So it's investigation that's able to make that connection between the sunlight and the presence or the absence of the shadow by comparing different states. So when you're in meditation, just to use a more specific example of practice, when you're sitting in meditation, you might have, let's say, a deep state of concentration that has a lot of joy, a lot of piti in it, right? A lot of physical and mental stimulating style of joy. And then if that state of concentration develops further or deepens a little bit, then that joy falls off. And you notice, oh, right. So when the piti falls away, then according to the suttas, that would be moving from second stage of concentration to third stage of concentration. But what one might notice without having all of that framework is just this, oh, when the joy falls away, it feels more peaceful, actually. And that way I can verify for myself the statement that the joy is a stimulating factor by investigation. Do you see?
Yes, thank you. I appreciated you bringing that in because I predominantly do the concentration. And it's like, okay, am I not doing that enough? Exploring that enough? The investigation enough? And it just sounds like it doesn't have to be so enough and so intense. Maybe not take it more lightly, that is what I'm hearing.
Right. Oftentimes with the states of concentration, it's best not to try to do investigation during the thing. You're just allowing as much as possible the relaxation to deepen and deepen so that those various layers of stimulation will continue to fall off and you can see more subtle states of the mind. And then after the fact, you can look back and see and do the investigation.
So I do have a question then that you raised further. When I lately going into concentration, I'll do work with the elements first, and I'll observe what's going on with the body when working with the elements. Because I've been with the state of affairs out there in the world, it's hard for me to jump right into concentration.
Yep.
And is that like doing a form of investigation then, where I've taken myself into a state of mindfulness and then working with the elements, or no?
It could be. I mean, it sounds to me actually like, Satipatthana, like first foundation of mindfulness, right? That you have the 4 elements meditation. as mindfulness of body.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I would understand it.
Oh. Oh. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Yes. Please pronounce your name for me because I tried and I hope that it wasn't too bad.
Oh, that was correct. Yeah.
Oh, good.
Mhm.
Shaohan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question about mindfulness. I feel I can be aware of my emotions, my movements if I'm doing something. But if I'm listening, for instance, you are teaching and engaging conversations or doing specific task, I feel if I'm mindful of my emotions, what I'm doing, then I don't know what's going on, for instance, in a conversation. So I'm not sure how to implement mindfulness daily, like how I can measure whether I'm doing it the right way or in a proper way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So two things that I think that I'm hearing in what you're saying there, Shahan, which is, first of all, we all have certain sense fields that we find easier to observe. You know, like some people are very auditory. I'm very auditory in my it's very easy for me to hear, to listen to things. But some people are much more visual, right? So the way that they would learn is by drawing a mandala, let's say, or something like that. So most of us have some sense fields that we find easier to be mindful of, and some that are a little bit harder to be mindful of. So it sounds like for you, you're noticing that, right? Some of them are easier and some of them are harder. Like the auditory is a little bit harder for you, maybe. So that's one thing. It's just a matter of, habit of the mind, and you can sort of practice and train with that and sort of try to improve the ones that you find a little bit harder, or you can just lean into the ones that you're very good at and to sort of develop those a little bit more rather than struggling. Okay? It's up to you which way you want to go with that. The other aspect that I think I'm hearing, though, is this about when you're in conversation. So yeah, the mind, let me say this. The mind moves incredibly quickly. Oftentimes we talk about mind moments, and mind moments are incredibly fast. Very, very hard to track in everyday life like this. It's not really usually possible unless you're in some kind of very still state of meditation. But what when you're being mindful, you can be mindful of inner experience or outer experience. It's all fine. It's just a question of which one you want to do. But to go back and forth between the two is often difficult, right? Because it takes a tremendous amount of effort to turn the attention of the mind. More effort than to just receive the next moment, if you will. It's like turning the ship versus just continuing going straight with the ship, right? So it may be that you're more interested in what's happening with you. And that's okay. Or it may be that you want to pay attention to what's happening in the conversation, what's being received. And then you see what I'm saying? Then you can focus on that, and eventually some of the inner thing will come up anyway, because that's just how we're built. But it's okay to just choose one or the other rather than trying to switch back and forth so much. And then you can do the other in retrospect. So in that case, if I said, okay, I'm going to really just focus very much externally on this conversation, what's happening with that person, what are they saying, what do they look like, all of my senses, right, on that. But then when that's done, then I can attend to, okay, then what's the effect that has on me? Okay, And then there's that turning inward with enough time and enough care, right? That you can really receive that part. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. All right. You're welcome. Okay, friends. Any last questions or reflections? All right, so I would like to dedicate the merits of our practice today, the beneficial karmic momentum that we have put in motion by our practice here today. Dedicate it to the well-being for ourselves, well-being for all beings, known and unknown, seen and unseen, that all beings might be free from mental and physical suffering, that all beings might come to know wisdom, might come to know the truths of their lives. By the power of the Buddhas, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, and each one's efforts, may all beings be liberated. All right, friends. Have a good evening. Thank you. See
Muchísimas
you.
gracias. Muchísimas gracias.
De nada.